What is going on, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit back at it with another video. Today, we have the final mock draft of the 2025 NFL draft season. Can you guys believe it? We are officially less than a week away from the actual NFL draft. 8 days from now, the draft will be over. We'll be on the other side of that. And we'll have like 7, 8 new rookies coming into the Las Vegas Raiders. Right? We'll have so many more players. We'll look different. Our future could be completely different as well. As the Raiders may actually end up drafting a quarterback, which would obviously change kind of the trajectory we're on right now. But I'm excited to kind of get into some of the players that I would take from the Raiders. I always believe that the best strategy to win a Super Bowl is going to be to build through the trenches. And I know people are always saying that, right? Build the trenches, build the trenches, build the trenches. But it takes actual strategy to be able to kind of do that, right? Like, for example, you don't want to draft a guard in the first round, right? You don't want to draft a guard in the top 10 or 15 picks. You don't generally want to draft a center in the first round either, but you do want to get your offensive tackles in the first round. If you want the best guards or centers coming out, you want to generally take those guys in the second round. At worst, take guys in the third round, right? And you can get starting caliber players. It really just comes down to that strategy. And I think John Spytek has proven himself multiple times, right? And, was he the actual general manager there? Obviously not, but John Spytek with the Buccaneers, that strategy they had was to build through the draft. Tristan Wirfs was one of the guys they ended up drafting. I believe it's Luke Gedeke is the other guy they ended up drafting. Cody Mox, another guy they ended up drafting. Those were all first or second round picks. And 3 of those 5 starters on the offensive line came just over the last 3 or 4 years, right? Let's get into this, man. Let's get right into this. So I don't think the Raiders are going to actually trade up, right? I think, the Raiders are most likely going to just stick and pick with the 6th overall pick. And, I think, I've thought of so much about this pick, When you think about the Raiders and kind of what this team is right now, right? The obvious need for the Raiders right now is the running back position. And if Ashton Jeanty is there with pick 6, it just makes sense. Like, take the running back, right? He's the best running back in this class. He's a game changer. Just take that guy, plug him in, and he changes the Raiders offense. And although I do generally agree with that, I also think the Raiders have to shore up the offensive line. I'm not sold on DJ Glaze. You guys know how I feel about him. Obviously, he might be able to prove himself as the franchise tackle, but we also know, generally speaking, if you don't prove yourself, pretty much in that first year, that a guy might not be able to develop into that guy. Thayer Munford's a good example of that. I'll give you guys a couple other examples from some other teams. The 49ers had a right tackle who, I forget the guy's name, but, he's an okay tackle. He's not anything great. Some people thought this guy could be the next Mike McGlinchey type of guy. And he lost him the Super Bowl, essentially, right? The Chiefs lined up Chris Jones over this guy in the Super Bowl. I forget the guy's name, but that's an example of it. Thayer Munford's another example, right? You don't see it right away, and guys struggle a little bit at that tackle position. And generally, you don't really develop all that much. Yes, you do get better from year 1 to 2, but we even saw it just most recently with Jackson Powers-Johnson. The guy's pretty much a day 1 superstar, and you can just see it, right? Like, you can just see it on tape. How special Jackson Powers-Johnson is. He's literally throwing guys like Vita Vea. That's not normal for a rookie to come in and be able to do, right? And of course, development definitely one of those things that really does happen in the NFL. But I just think that there's certain things you can't develop. Like, for example, Thayer Munford can't get quicker, right? He'll never get faster. He'll never get quicker. That's not something he'll be able to improve on, especially at least improve to the point where, Colton Miller's an elite mover, right? Penei Sewell is an elite mover. Thayer Munford will never be that type of mover. He might be able to improve like 5%, but he's still nowhere near those other guys. To me, I think the Raiders need to shore up that right tackle position. I do understand DJ Glaze was a 3rd round pick, and I know some people are going to say, hey, let DJ Glaze, let him actually, let him develop, let's see what he can actually do. The thing with DJ Glaze is I think he'll be a really, really good interior offensive lineman. Right? He's strong, he's physical, he's pretty long and lengthy, right? I think he'd be a really, really good interior offensive lineman. And I think for the Raiders, if you bring in a guy like Armin Membaugh out of Missouri, who I would draft if he's there with the 6th overall pick. If you take this guy right here with the 6th overall pick, essentially what you're doing if you're the Las Vegas Raiders is you're shoring up your right tackle. And more than shoring up your right tackle, you're going to allow DJ Glaze to jump to the inside. So now you have your right tackle, and Armin Membaugh is going to be the future, right? He's going to be the best offensive lineman out of this class. And not only is he going to be really, really, really good as he gets to the Raiders, but DJ Glaze can jump to the inside, and he'll be really, really good on the inside as well. You have Cole, you have Jackson Powers-Johnson. You basically have 4 of your 5 starters right there. And I'm sure between Alex Kappa and Dylan Parham, we'll be able to figure out that other guard position. Right? I think for the Raiders, another thing you do have to keep in mind, and again, I know a lot of people are going to push back against this pick. I think one of the things we have to also kind of realize is, the Raiders might actually win 9 games this season. Right? Geno Smith's always won like 10 games every single season. So if the Raiders win 9 or 10 games this season, which I think is realistic, we're not going to be in position next year to draft an offensive tackle. Right? Offensive tackles generally go in the top 15 picks, especially the good ones. Right? And even this year, we'll probably see 2 or 3 guys go in the top 15 picks. And that happens every single year. So again, if the Raiders do end up being good this year, and let's say DJ Glaze is not the guy for the Raiders of the future, well, what ends up happening is now you're going to go into next season and you might be picking like 21st or 22nd or whatever it is. You're not picking in the top 10. So now you can't get that offensive tackle. All right. So again, I think for the Raiders, this just kind of shores up a very, very important position, right? I think offensive tackles are arguably the most important position right after your quarterback. And I think for the Raiders, this just makes a ton of sense. I also don't think drafting an offensive tackle in the 2nd or 3rd round generally works out. So again, if I'm the Raiders, I think Armin Membaugh makes a ton of sense. It allows you to get a lot better as you kind of go forward. Let's get into the second pick, right? So obviously, Raiders go offensive tackle. I think with that, DJ Glaze jumps to the inside. I do think in the 2nd round, it's kind of the, it's definitely the point where you want to start to look at, running backs, guards, right? Even wide receivers, another position that the Raiders need. And, if there's guys, for example, Jaden Higgins could be an ex-wide receiver for the Raiders. Very, very solid wide receiver. There's other guys as well. Kyle Williams. I think Kyle Williams goes in the top 15 picks. I think PFF's wrong on him. But it's not just PFF. There's a lot of people that are wrong on Kyle Williams. I think Kyle Williams is another guy, right? Like, if these guys are actually there with the 37th overall pick, these are guys that could actually come to the Raiders day one and be good football players. So the Raiders could consider a wide receiver. I also do think that the Raiders from the receiver position are in a pretty good spot right now. You could target a free agent if you wanted to. You have Jacoby, you have Trey Tucker, and you have Brock Bowers, and you have Michael Mayer. Right? I think those 4 guys are pretty good, pretty good receivers. And, again, you can get a wide receiver if you want. You can potentially bring in a free agent. I think if you want a wide receiver, you take one with the 6th overall pick. If you don't take one with the 6th overall pick, I'd probably hold off of bringing a guy in, right? Unless you wanted to bring a guy in specifically for one role, right? Like you can draft Trey Tucker in the 3rd or 4th round, and he's going to be a guy that's going to just run deep, right? He's going to be an influence guy. You can potentially bring in a guy like Jacoby Myers, who you might say, hey, this guy's like a possession wide receiver. He has really, really good hands. So the Raiders need to go into the 2nd round, and I think running back, you got to get a running back out of this class. And the thing with this class is there's just so many great running backs coming out, right? You got Ashton Genty, you got guys like Cam Scadaboo. People love this kid. You got guys like Caleb Johnson and Travion Henderson, Quishon Judkins, another guy, right? There's just so many running backs in this class. And, if we didn't have, the 15 starting caliber running backs in this class, I think with that 6th overall pick, I think it makes sense to go Ashton Genty. But if you do skip out on Ashton Genty, you can still get a difference maker. There are still guys in this class that'll still give you the production that Josh Jacobs, gave the Raiders or, has given the Green Bay Packers. You can still get that type of running back in this class in the 2nd round. Nick Chubb went in the 2nd round. Jonathan Taylor went in the 2nd round as well, right? So there's running backs that have gone in the 2nd round that I think, you can still get a really, really good running back. And it has to be a running back in the 2nd round if you don't go that position in the 1st. And I think a guy that Chip Kelly has obviously brought in and has experience with is Travion Henderson. I know some people like Quishon Judkins as well, but Henderson's going to be different, man. I think this guy could actually end up being a 1st round pick. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the top 20 picks, to be honest with you guys. But since he's here, we're going to go ahead and make that pick, and we're going to take Henderson. I think with the 37th overall pick, that's a good spot to take a running back if you're the Raiders, because then you can even come back with the 68th overall pick, and you can focus on so many different positions, right? And one of the positions that I think the Raiders can focus on in this class, especially in the 3rd or 4th round, is going to be a safety or a cornerback. And earlier on in the process, I didn't think the Raiders necessarily needed a safety. I always said, hey, Patrick Graham's a good coach. Pete Carroll's a good coach. These guys will be able to find safety prospects, right? Via the free agency, They might like someone that's already in the building. But the fact that the Raiders let both Marcus Epps and Trayvon Merrick walk, and then they essentially went out there and they said, hey, we're going to sign two guys that kind of play the same role. I think Jeremy Chin, Isaiah Pollamalu, both basically play the same role, right? Those guys are not going to play the post safety. Those guys aren't going to be, running deep. Even last season, I watched a lot of Isaiah Pollamalu tape, especially in the offseason as I was kind of getting ready for some of these different videos. Isaiah Pollamalu struggles in open space, right? He's not very fluid. He's not very quick, and he struggles. And I think for the Raiders, you got to get a safety coming out in the third or fourth round. Now, again, I'll be honest, guys, I don't always think the simulators are correct. At the end of the day, there's one guy at PFF that's making these rankings, right? And I don't agree with it, right? Like, for example, there's just no way Kevin Winston Jr. is going to be available with the 68th overall pick, right? I just don't see that happening. Same with Kyle Williams. There's just no way he's going to be available. And you guys will see next week. Some people are going to say Kyle Williams, the 13th overall pick. Who the hell is this guy, right? And trust me, this guy's going to be a good football player. Kyle Williams, if he's here, I would take him. I don't think he's going to be here, but I still think the Raiders need a safety. And a guy that I really like is going to be Texas safety Andrew Makuba. This guy had, I think, like 6 interceptions this past season. He had 9 pass breakups, right? Got his hands on the ball a lot this year for Texas. I'd argue he was their best defensive player, right? He was a really, really, really good player for Texas. I think for the Raiders, you need a safety. You need a guy that can run, that could, play that post safety, can run sideline to the sideline, has fluid hips. And Makuba just makes a ton of sense. Really, really solid player in my opinion. I don't watch safeties all that much. I've watched 3 safeties this cycle, right? And Makuba is one of the guys. And I only watched this tape because he follows me on Twitter. So I went and I checked this tape out. I did not think this guy would be as good as he is, but the guy's a stud, man. So the Raiders are going to end up drafting him. And let's talk about this. So the Raiders now have their starting right tackle, obviously. They have their starting running back, and they have a starting safety out of this class as well, right? So the Raiders are now at this point where they got 3 starters, and now you're entering the 4th round. And I should also make this point. Some people, and I had a guy make this comment to me once, right? I was talking football with a friend of mine, and he told me, he goes, hey, round 3 or 4, like, you're still watching the draft, like, these are special teams players. Like, why watch the draft at this point? The thing with 3rd and 4th round is there's starters in the 3rd or 4th round, right? There's guys that'll be all pro players in the 3rd or 4th round, right? So these are the rounds where you get starters. And in this draft specifically, there are so many really, really good football players that I think for the Raiders, you can still get starting caliber players, with pick 108 or, pick 143 or pick 180 even, right? Which I think is the 5th round pick that the Raiders have. So the Raiders get a starting tackle, they get a starting running back, they get a starting starting safety as well. You could consider bringing in a guard if you wanted to, if you're the Raiders. I'm going to be honest with you, there are some guys that I really, really like in this class that I think could be difference-making guards. There's one guy specifically, Dylan Fairchild. This guy's built absolutely different. I'm not going to draft the guard, but I think for the Raiders, you could consider drafting a guard at this pick. 4th round could get you a day 1 starting guard, right? So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm not going to do it, but Dylan Fairchild, man, this guy's built differently. If you haven't watched this tape, man, I highly suggest you guys check him out. Very, very solid football player. There are some offensive tackles that I think will still be available that could also end up jumping to the inside and playing guard. Jalen Rivers, I think, this would be a good spot to take him. I think he's a day 1 starting guard as well. Jalen Rivers went to the Senior Bowl and he was the best player at the Senior Bowl, right? For the offensive lineman, in my opinion. The guy was an absolute stud. You could double down and take another running back, although I think if the Raiders are going to draft the 2nd running back, they should wait until a little bit later. This class has, again, 15 starting caliber running backs. You could take a cornerback. I think this is also a pretty solid draft for corners. Adonal Fortune, I got the privilege of watching him at the Hula Bowl. Very solid corner, has a ton of upside. Denzel Burke was considered a 1st round pick at one point, right? Ventrell Cypress saw him at the Hula Bowl as well. Corners always a system position. I know the Raiders aren't necessarily locked in with the guys that they kind of have, right? It's kind of up in the air, but I think corner is a position you could probably wait off on because you do have 2 guys who drafted last year Cameron Richardson in the 4th round, and then you also took another one in the 7th round. You could wait to let those guys develop, and even the year before, Ja'Cory Bennett was a 4th round pick as well. You can let those guys develop, right, and see what they have before you say we need to go out there and start drafting more corners. I'm going to wait on the corner position. Another position that's very deep this year is going to be the defensive line. I think they're starting caliber players at both edge and interior defensive line well into that 4th round range. There's one guy that I really like coming out of this class. I might be alone on this one, to be honest, guys, but Cameron Jackson, Florida interior defensive lineman, dude is massive. I don't see that it actually has this guy's stuff or his actual height and stuff on here. It has it right here. 6'6", 342. The guy is absolutely massive. He's essentially going to be a guy that would be a nose tackle, but the thing with the Florida D tackles is they're not just hey, he's a power based guy. He doesn't have any pass rush moves. Florida has a good coach over there, right? Defensive line coach, kind of like Rob Leonard, right? Rob Leonard just turns these guys into like really, really good football players. I think a guy like Cameron Jackson can make a lot of sense for the Raiders because we have Adam Butler, we have Christian Wilkins, and those are guys that are like 3 technique defensive linemen, right? They're guys that are going to be upfield pass rushers. Well, we need run defenders, right? We don't really have guys, and I think in the NFL, teams are starting to draft these guys that are like true run defenders, but a guy like Cameron Jackson also has upside as a pass rusher, right? He has a really good swim move. He's massive, so guys start to kind of lean into him. I'm going to take him with this pick right here. I think Cameron Jackson, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the top 2 rounds, to be honest, guys. I think he's a really, really good football player. I would not be shocked at all if that ends up happening. Now, we drafted a right tackle already, right? And my hope is that Colton Miller ends up extending. There is a chance he doesn't extend, right? There's a chance that John Spytek feels like, hey, Colton Miller's not worth the money, right? He's not worth the $22, $23 million that he's going to be asking for, and there's a chance the Raiders might look to move off of him. Never say never, right? Like, I know for us fans, we've had Colton Miller on this roster for years, but it's not guaranteed that he's still going to be here as we kind of go forward, right? At some point, some general manager is going to decide to move off of him. At some point, Maxx Crosby's going to get released as well, right? It's just a matter of time until every player at some point kind of gets released. If the Raiders do plan to move off of Colton Miller, getting Armin Membao at pick 6, it's just that much more important. But then I think even following it up with another offensive tackle a little bit later on in the draft, guys that has a little bit of upside. You got guys like Chase Lunt coming out of UConn, very, very solid. Logan Brown's one of my favorite offensive linemen coming out this year. And even just kind of going down the list, Essapol's another guy I really like coming out of Washington. Washington State specifically. The guy has a ton of upside. I think he was at the East-West Shrine. He had a pretty good day. He went up against Tyler Barron, who's a very good defensive end coming out of Miami, and he had a really, really good couple of reps against that guy, right? I probably wouldn't draft a tackle, though, at this point, because I think with pick 143, you can still get an impact player, right? It's not like pick 143 means that, like, the guy you're now drafting is going to be, like, an average player. You can still get a starter. And let's look at some wide receivers. Ty Felton's a guy that I felt like would have been drafted a lot higher, but for some reason his stock never really rose over the draft period. Nick Nash is another guy. I know a lot of people like him. He led the league in, I think, like catches this past season. Jimmy Horn Jr. has a lot of speed. He's another guy to kind of keep an eye on. Another guy that's kind of interesting is LaJohntay Wester. LaJohntay Wester is one of those guys who, this guy came to Colorado, and before he came to Colorado, he had 107 catches in 2023. Right? This guy was second in the FBS in catches. And for some reason, it just, I get why, right? You got a guy in front of you in Travis Hunter, who's going to get a lot of the targets. Even Will Shepard, who's the other wide receiver that these guys have. Will Shepard, I think, is like a true X, right? 6'3", 205 pounds. Shepard has a lot of upside as well, right? So it's another guy the Raiders could consider. I do think the Raiders need to get some taller, larger wide receivers, but we have Brock Bowers as well. So maybe you hold off on wide receivers. You could take a quarterback, right? There's a couple of really, really good developmental quarterbacks at this point. Quinn Ewers is a guy if he's available. We're going to wait off on that. I don't want to take Quinn Ewers here, but The Raiders didn't meet with Quinn Ewers, right? So there's a chance that the Raiders do end up drafting him as well. Some people think the Raiders might draft the center this year and move Jackson Powers-Johnson to guard. I don't love doing that, right? I would not really be on board with that, to be honest with you guys. Maybe the Raiders take an edge defender. I always say this with edge defenders. The guys that are going to be the top first round picks that are edge defenders are going to be guys that have like elite movement and they have like elite physical traits. Guys like Tyree Wilson, guys like Shamar Stewart, guys like Will Anderson, right, coming out of Alabama. Elite, just the way he looked, right, the physicality, the movement. But one of the things that happens in round 3, 4, and 5 is you start to get the unathletic, technique-based guys, right? The Maxx Crosbys of the world, the Malcolm Koonces of the world, right? Guys that have elite pass rush ability, but teams just don't value them because they're not, they haven't shown that they're elite run defenders, and because they don't have the body structure, teams don't value that, right? Last year, Austin Booker went in, I think, the 5th round to the Bears. The guy dominated, right? Absolutely dominated in preseason. He didn't play a whole lot during the regular season. I think he played like 200-300 snaps, but he still had like 4 sacks during the regular season, right? He's the Malcolm. He reminds me of Maxx Crosby, but he'll be on that Malcolm Koonce trajectory where like year 3 he'll break out. Austin Booker's really, really, really good. Tyler Barron's a guy that I really like coming out of Miami. Now there are some character issues with Tyler Barron. Does he love the game of football? Apparently he does not, right? That's a report on him. I think he has a half brother as well, who some people have questioned as well a little bit. Barron's one of those guys, though, I think has elite movement, has elite pass rush, has a really good cross chop as well. If Rob Leonard can potentially bring this guy in and develop him a little bit, you might have your Malcolm Koonce replacement down the line, right? I don't think Malcolm Koonce is going to be brought back to the Raiders after this season. Think about this. Malcolm Koonce did not play this past season. We got 9 games out of Malcolm Koonce the year before. And in those 9 games, the Raiders were willing to pay more to Malcolm Koonce, who's coming off an ACL injury, who hadn't played for an entire year. The Raiders were willing to pay him more than they were willing to pay Josh Jacobs, who had like 1,700 yards just the year before, right? Or whatever it was that Josh Jacobs had. Think about that. Malcolm Koonce got like $13 million a year, and he didn't play this past season. And that's because of the potential and upside he has. So I don't think Malcolm Koonce is coming back to the Raiders after this season. Even if he only has like 7 or 8 sacks, he's going to get $25 million. Maybe not 25, but he'll get like 20 to 25, somewhere in that range. Because he got 12.5 without even playing, right? So it's kind of crazy to kind of think that. Pick 180 is going to be an interesting pick. There's a lot of really good players who can still end up going. I think as you get later on in the draft, this is where you want to start to bring in developmental players, right? Linebackers, you want to kind of bring some of these guys in at this point. Corners as well, right? These are system positions, right? Pete Carroll can take a 5th round linebacker and turn him into a Hall of Fame player, right? We've seen that happen before. Patrick Graham can potentially find a UDFA like Amari Gaynor, and Gaynor may end up having a lot of success, and we'll see what ends up kind of happening. There's a linebacker that I really, really like coming out of Texas, David Benda. I think the G is silent. Very, very, very solid run defender. Really, really good physical tools as well, right? 6 feet, 235, strong as hell. This guy is a downhill linebacker, right? And I think one of the things with this scheme and system is we need guys that are downhill, right? We need guys that are going to get after it a little bit, specifically as when it comes to run defense. He had an 84.5 run defense grade, which blew to me. I think it means elite. Coverage, not as good, but still pretty good for a linebacker. This is a guy that I think the Raiders could, develop into something. So, I think the Raiders do have to shore up the linebacker position. There are other guys you could possibly bring. Danny Stutzman's another guy that's pretty interesting. Kareem Reed, spoke to him a lot at the Hula Bowl. He has some potential as well. Very smart player. I'm going to go ahead and take David Benda out of Texas. So, we're going to take him. I think he has some potential. I think he has some upside. Again, don't mind where these guys are ranked, right? The ranks, the ADP, that's not where these guys are going to get drafted, right? Especially at this point. You don't know which quarterbacks and receivers are going to go where. You're just guessing at this point, right? Truth be told. Quarterbacks. If you're going to get a quarterback, you want to take one in probably the 3rd or 4th round, at the very least. I think the Raiders could take another running back. I think it'd actually be smart to take another running back Last year, one of the things that John Spytek did was he took a running back out of Oregon that was very quick, very shifty. He was a little undersized. And he was explosive, though, man. And Oregon has another running back that's very, very similar to that. And it'd probably be lazy just to take Jordan James because Spytek took the Oregon running back last year. I think Jaquavius Marks might be a little bit better. Raheem Sanders has some potential as well. I do think it would be smart for the Raiders to come back and take another running back. I think you're at a position where you literally don't have any running backs right now, right? I know you have Raheem Mostert, but there's a good chance the Raiders release guys like, there's a good chance we release Zamir White. There's a really good chance he ends up getting released. Even some of the other running backs we have. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Dylan Labe ends up getting released. And I know he's technically under contract and we lose that cap hit, but he hasn't really shown anything. He fumbled the ball twice last year, right? We'll see if Spytek ends up keeping him. I do think that the new regime's going to come in and they're going to cut a lot of guys, right? If it doesn't fit their scheme, if they don't fit the mold of like what they want out of their players in terms of the work ethic. We saw Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler come in and, first year Alex Leatherwood's gone, right? Going into, I think, his second or third year, like they cut ties real quick with them. I think we're going to see guys end up getting cut. So I wouldn't be surprised if we need to draft 2 running backs or 2 guards or 2 tackles. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we get to that point. There's 2 picks left. I want to show you guys the picks what we have so far. We have a tackle, running back, safety, interior defensive lineman, edge player, linebacker. We got another running back. Let's get a guard. I think, the Raiders can obviously still need I think they need a guard, right? I think they could obviously look to upgrade. I know we do obviously have, Alex Kappa, who we paid like $5 million to. We have Dylan Parham, but Parham is in his final year, so I could see us cutting ties with him as well. And then I think the guy you are able to draft right now, you can kind of develop him a little bit. There's one guy that I personally really, really like. There's a couple guys that I like. You guys know me with offensive linemen. There's a couple of guys that I really, really like. One of them is going to be Joshua Gray coming out of Oregon State. I think he does fit the wide zone scheme a little bit better. And I think the Raiders can run a lot of outside zone as well, but I don't see us running a lot of wide zone. Jackson Slater, strong, physical, really, really solid interior offensive lineman as well. I like Miles Frazier as well, but I'm going to take Jackson Slater, man. There's something about these lower level guards sometimes that get into the NFL and they just dominate, right? I think it's the Broncos right guard. I forget where he came from. I think he was like a D2, D3 guy. He's one of the highest paid guards now in the NFL, right? He got like $20 million last season. And he's good too, right? I forget his name. But final pick, man. And, it's interesting because I do think the Raiders with the draft right here get a lot of impact plays pretty much. Impact players day one. They get some development guys. Long term, you want to make sure, in 3 years, your rookie linebacker is going to become a free agent. You're not going to be able to sign him. So you got to figure that out, right? You got to have a plan for that. And you start to, try bringing in guys 2 or 3 years earlier. That Trayvon Merrick and Nate Hobbs might be guys you can't bring back. You start to try to replace those guys a little bit earlier, right? And I think for the Raiders, it's going to be important to at least start looking ahead as well a little bit. Maybe you get a wide receiver. There's a lot of really good wide receivers in this class. Similar to running backs, I think there's like 20 wide receivers that have, not necessarily they're going to get drafted, but there will be impact players, right? Not impact like Justin Jefferson, but impact as in like they have like 450 yards, right? And they'll play 300 snaps a season, right? And that's impact. I know it's not like elite impact, game changing, but don't overlook the fact that role players have a real role, and it's just as important to have a great number 2 wide receiver, number 2 guard, number 2 defensive tackle, as it is to have that Maxx Crosby caliber player. Because for every Maxx Crosby, Adam Butler has to step in and be able to beat. When Maxx gets double teamed, Butler has to step up, right? He's a number 2 guy. If your starting guard goes down, your backup has to come in, right? The Eagles dealt with that in the championship game, right? I believe it was Landon Dixon, their starting center, was out. Oh, I'm sorry. Their starting center, Cam Jurgens, was hurt. And their left guard, Landon Dixon, jumped over into the center position. And then they had their backup guard come in, Tyler Steen. He started at that left guard position. But having those guys is important, right? Because those are the games where, like, you need guys to kind of fit, step in and help win, right? Final pick here. I'm going to end up just going with special teams would be interesting, but I don't think the Raiders need special teams at all. I think wide receiver makes a lot of sense for the Raiders. I know Efton Chisholm was a Hula Bowl guy, but he's a guy that's had a lot of looks. I know a lot of people love this guy. He's one of the guys on Twitter I see a lot, right? Jimmy Horn Jr. is an interesting pick potentially here as well. I think Horn is going to be a lot better than kind of where he's being ranked, at least right now. I'm going to take LeJohntay Wester, though, man. This guy dominated in 2023, and when he came to Colorado, people were like, this guy's going to end up being elite for Colorado, right? He's going to end up being like, Travis Hunter, basically. He's going to have that type of impact. And it just never worked out. And it's not that, it's not that he was a bad player. It's just Colorado's offense was really weird. And I watched a lot of Colorado football this year, right? I'd never watched one college team during the season as much as I watched Colorado this past season. And LeJohntay Wester had so much hype coming in. It just never really worked out. But I do think that as we kind of go forward, he's going to be a player that's going to be good in the NFL. And again, for the Raiders, worst case scenario, as a 7th round pick, Wester develops a little bit. Maybe, year 3 or 4, he kind of starts benefiting the Raiders a little bit. We'll see what ends up happening, man. There's my picks right there. It's the final mock draft. You guys know how I feel about offensive linemen. I mean, all of these picks we've kind of gotten into. But I really do think, if the Raiders end up with this right here, I think Armin Membaugh is going to be really, really good. I think Travion Henderson's going to be really, really good. Andrew Makuba, really, really solid safety as well, right? And then, of course, Cameron Jackson. If you guys haven't watched his tape, go watch it. I might have to do a film breakdown on the Football Scout channel talking about Jackson. Because I really, really do like his game. And again, I didn't mention it 100%, but the Florida D tackles can pass rush well, and it's because of their coach that they have over there. It's kind of like Rob Leonard, right? Like that impact that he has. Florida has the best defensive tackle coming out next year in Caleb Banks. He decided to go back, but had he come out, he would have been a top 5 pick. Very, very, very solid defensive tackle. But the pass rush that guy has, he's developed it by the coaching over there. Cameron Jackson's been coached well as well, so he has that pass rush upside as well. But he's a nose, right? He's a run defender first and foremost, and he's 6'6", 345. He's big, he's strong. And then, of course, Tyler Barron has potential and upside. Hopefully, Maxx Crosby can help kind of develop him a little bit. You get a linebacker out of this class. You get a second running back in Marks. You get a guard who could start down the line, right? As we, Alex Cappa, Dylan Parham eventually leave. You get that starting guard in Jackson Slater. LeJohntay Wester, I think it's just high upside, right? That's just kind of it, high upside. Let me know what you guys think, man. The draft's right around the corner. In the next couple of days, I am going to do a breakdown of all the players that the Raiders could potentially take with the 6th overall pick. We'll look at like 12 different guys, and I'll talk about the scheme and fit and those type of things. I don't feel well, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.